Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast, the show that explores all the ways you can evolve into the best version of yourself as a leader. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love and care and inclusion, it will make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about love as a leadership and business strategy. Let's do this.
Hey, got a good show for you today. It's going to be a little different, though. Sam Castor, who is the CEO of Alevea, if you recall, Alevea was created by Sam to provide nutritional technologies that address poor health and diseases around the world. It's a social entrepreneurship organization. If you haven't heard that episode, I put it in my show notes. Go check it out. Click on it. It's episode 237. So what does Sam have to do with this episode? Well, today's episode is going to be Sam interviewing me on the show. And it's the first time this has happened. I do get complaints that people don't get to hear often from my own views about what's going on in my own world and my journey into leadership development, is especially servant leadership, which is kind of my passion. And so Sam approached me and said, Marcel, how about we just turn the tables? I'll interview you. And I'm like, wow, that's gracious. I was humbled and still am. And so I took him up on the offer. So today's episode is you get to listen to me talk about how I do things and how I strategize and work with clients. So Sam wanted to know my story. You know how, I start the episode every show asking my guests, what's your story? Well, Sam asked me the same question. So he wanted to know how I became known as a servant leadership expert and the whole journey around that, how I became, one of the go-to people to build up servant leaders and create servant leadership organizations. So, by the way, this is completely unscripted. It is a conversation that Sam wanted to have, and he asked questions, and I provided him with the answers. So you're going to hear about how to build the right servant leadership culture, why culture is so important in business, the biggest myths and truths around servant leadership. So all that is included in this episode, and you'll hear my personal journey. So I hope you get some value out of it, and let's get to it. Here we go. Here's Sam's conversation with yours truly.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sam Castor. I am a social entrepreneur. And today I get to interview Marcel Schwantes. Hi, Marcel. How you doing?
Hey, Sam. I'm good.
I'm excited about this because we had the chance to meet, and I think it was on a Sunday morning. Spent several hours talking about what you're doing these days. I'm going to tell you why that's important to me, especially for the listeners out there. First of all, I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I've started businesses. The bigger that my businesses got, the harder it was to control the culture. So, for instance, I started a business in 1994. In over a 20-year period, we expanded into 26 countries. We took our company public. We were doing about $500 million a year in revenue. But along the way, we completely lost what I would call our culture. And we, of course, part of that was going public. That created silos within our business. And, instead of a culture of innovation, it became a culture of penny pinchers, just everybody watching every cent and every organization within the organization vying for their own, place and budget and all these. Anyway, we completely lost our entrepreneurial spirit and our ability to innovate and risk take and things like that. I brought a lot of consultants into that business, Marcel, to kind of help us figure that out. And, some of them were very motivational, but motivation lasted about a week, after they left, and then we were right back into the same challenges. Uh, in 2015, I was introduced, or 14, to a concept called social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship is really my calling in life. A social entrepreneur is a new breed of entrepreneur that is leveraging the economic power of the marketplace to provide sustainable solutions to the world's biggest problems. So instead of opening a charity, you open a business. Now, I would have loved to just converted my existing business at that time. Again, that was doing about $500 million a year into a social business. But it was too far gone. I had too much accountability, too many, make your numbers work this month. And the whole giving concept and leader stewardship went out the window with that. So I had to actually resign from the company that I had started and built to start a new company in the area of social entrepreneurship. And I always thought, that was really, really disappointing. But after we talked that Sunday morning, I thought, I wish Marcel had come along about 10 years earlier. So with that set up, Marcel, I'm excited about sharing the things that I learned that Sunday morning about you and what you're doing right now, because I think organizations that are struggling to try to protect their culture need to hear what you're doing. Let me just give an introduction. Marcel is the speaker, an author, an acclaimed executive coach, and an Inc. magazine contributing editor with a global following. Marcel delivers presentations, workshops, courses, and coaching programs about the human side of business and how cultures of care, connection, and belonging power companies to thrive and outperform their competitions. Marcel hosts the popular Love in Action podcast, which is heard in over 160 countries. So Marcel, to start this out, tell us your story. How did you get involved in all this?
I love this question because I always ask of my guests, and now it's like going right back to me. I'm like, so my story, I'm a corporate guy, so I didn't venture into the world of entrepreneurship until maybe 2013, when I was laid off of my last corporate gig, and I came up the ranks through HR. So I helped leaders and organizations become more efficient, streamline their hiring processes, and help recruit, and then I got into the leadership development side of HR, because that's where I saw most of the problems coming out of the people issues that I was seeing. I always pointed right back to leadership. So if I can start to build up leadership capacity, maybe we will see some of these people issues disappear. Well, they didn't.
Right. Yeah.
People issues are always going to be there. And so I, kept moving up the ranks up through the HR management route. And then when I was laid off my last corporate job, I kind of tossed in the towel, Sam, at the corporate world. I'm like, okay, I am done with the corporate world, because I thought that I could bring more value to being that third party that now sort of like stands on the outside and helps people, helps leaders, helps executives to really work on the culture piece that you're talking about. And then, since then I've been helping them do that, and we can get into that discussion. But yeah, I've been coaching on my own now, been on with my own practice now for, I would say, about 10 to 12 years roughly.
And what kind of lessons do you think you've learned throughout this progression?
Well, the biggest lesson I think I learned is a personal one that's going to come out in my book. And, I got to see the worst side of leadership, which I call toxic management, and then the best side of leadership. But let me talk about the toxic management part first, okay? Because I got to experience it firsthand. There's a lot of suffering going on in the world. And what we are not doing right is placing the right people into leadership roles. And so, if you go back decades, if not a century or more, there is this stigma that dictates that for you to rise up to the top, you have to have certain skills or maybe certain ways of being that get you going up the ladder, right? And so you can talk about how so many people that you see now they get up there through power and control and charisma, and even obviously confidence is a big deal. We want confident leaders. However, when you get to that point where confidence becomes overconfidence, then we start to go into the realm of narcissism and all of those things that unfortunately the really bad leadership behaviors. But those are the people that sometimes float to the top because of how we have sort of determined or predetermined that this is the criteria for moving up the ranks if you want to be in the C-suite, right? And so we have people with a lot hungry for power that arrive there by not having the right skills, the right competencies to lead other human beings. And so, if you're familiar with some of the recent history of some of the companies that have gone down, Enron and WorldCom, most recently in the last 20 years or so, 25 years. Those are the leaders I'm speaking about that got there, and they were very much successful. But what they failed at is to understand the human empowerment and integrity, and even something as counterintuitive as humility, which is one of the biggest leadership strengths that you can utilize in the role to get the best out of people, right? And so, we saw the opposite of all those things float to the top, creating massive financial hemorrhaging in a lot of the organizations because they lacked the skills to become a leader. So, and so that's the toxic management side, right? So I got to see that, and I got to experience it firsthand as an employee under that kind of toxic management, where even my health was at risk. I ended up in disability. And for a couple of months, I was literally paralyzed from the waist down due to immense stress caused by toxic management. And so when I recovered, and gained mobility again, and phased out of that one job at a hospital on the West Coast under toxic management, I finished that role, moved on. The next company that hired me, it was another hospital under a completely different style of management. And so we can talk a little bit about that person, but he was an executive that led through what we now call servant leadership. And that was the first time that I didn't have the label yet, Sam. I didn't know what servant leadership meant, but I knew that the way that this individual led his team and led me was completely a 180 from where I came from in the previous job, toxic management. So it was the first for me. I'm like, what's going on here? This is unusual. Why is this person spending so much time trying to help us to succeed, trying to help us to remove obstacles from our path and mentoring us and making sure that we have all the tools and resources we needed? This was like foreign concept for me, right?
Yeah.
used to that. My previous history was just toxic management. So I didn't think that was possible in a real life work setting, and so that's when I got exposed to that. So I started to investigate, okay, what is it about this executive that makes him different than every previous boss I've had up to that point?
Right.
Yeah, I realized as I delved into the research and the literature that all of his styles of leading people and managing people pointed back to the tenet of servant leadership. And that's when the light bulb went on.
So define servant leadership as you understand it today.
I think the simplest way to define, I mean, there are various ways to define it. I would say the servant leadership is when you have the mindset of putting others' needs ahead of your own and helping people to grow and succeed. And so it's a very selfless way of leading. And so you lead by serving others first. And so very counterintuitive even today. But we're finding out more and more that these cultures that are adapting the servant leadership mentality or methodology, they are becoming more sustainable. They have less turnover. They have higher productivity outputs. Whenever engagement scores come back, engagement is very high, which is really important for keeping people, into their jobs and not, quitting. And nowadays, servant leadership has become sort of an umbrella term for so many other things, that you don't even have, when you talk about a good, high-performing company culture, you don't even have to slap the label servant leadership on it anymore, because it's just a given that people are going to be empowered. If you're in a high-performing company culture, there's good community there, right? People feel like they belong. And managers do whatever it takes to take care of people. And then so there's a high trust level. So yeah, servant leadership now is, it's almost like a catch-all term, right? From its origins, because it's permeated the corporate sector and entrepreneurship to such degree that I think that right now it's, there's a lot of overlaps into other areas of leadership.
And why do you think that there's so few servant leaders in industry? Because it's not common. It may be becoming more common from your experience, but from what I've seen in the industries I've been in, it's not a common thing, And I know that, like, for instance, when we took our company public and we really started growing, what corporate America required us to do is have outside board members, have MBAs, have this and that and the other. And so we built the culture of people that were very accountable in terms of financial, but not in terms of personal, and just completely lost control of the culture. Now, I would consider myself a servant leader because that's just what I'm geared to do. But it didn't work in that environment, and it's because I didn't understand how to implement that, and or to transfer my passion for it into an organizational structure.
Right.
So I don't know if that's what you see as epidemic out there. Not, you have individuals that may have the traits, but there's no training. Like, no MBA trains for servant leadership. It's all numbers and running a successful financial organization.
Yeah.
So what do you see out there? What is the biggest challenge with implementing something like this?
Yeah, Sammy, and I'm curious as well about some of the pressures that you have faced as an executive, because you might have some good input on this as well. But I have seen that, public companies especially, they have to respond to the shareholders. And so a lot of that pressure to financially perform well and bring shareholder value puts a lot of pressure on executives to put the profit over people. And so when you start to look at short-term gains and you lose sight of your North Star, right? You're kind of like you are more focused on serving the wrong people. So if you have a culture, if you have the best of both worlds, where you have a culture, say like Southwest Airlines, where you take care of people, and the culture is healthy and it's strong, and even when they have disasters, like they had one recently where they the airplane passenger got sucked out of the window, and that was a horrible thing. They were able to bounce back from that, and still, they didn't go down because of that. It was sort of a little bit of a PR nightmare, but they overcame that. They're resilient because of the culture, right? And so they were able to withstand that. And so then what happens is these companies that have strong cultures, from the top down, you have the executives and the executive team that are believers. And so let's take the example of servant leadership. They are believers in this style of leading, right? And so for them, if they have if they have a board or shareholder, et cetera, they are able to actually convince all of their stakeholders of the power and the impact of having this kind of culture. And so, but it's not a flip of the switch, because Southwest Airlines did not become the #1 airline in the US overnight. They built this culture. They had a belief system, right? And they transferred the mindset down to the managers on the front lines to take care of employees, who then took care of the customers. And that's why customers love Southwest Airlines, right? Because you're not going to get that kind of customer service anywhere else. But that was a trickle down process that starts with the leaders. Herb Kelleher was, the one that actually had the belief system to say, we're going to operate this way. And then, of course, Herb's way he traveled that down to lower ranks, and that's what transformed the culture at Southwest. But it took a few seasons, right? And then once you start to operate that way and you become financially successful doing it, then other people, the media, and shareholders will pick up that this is something that we want to jump on. This is a bandwagon that not only is profitable for us, but the employees and communities are saying this is the kind of culture that takes care of people as well. So it's the best of both worlds. But it doesn't start with serving the shareholders first. It always starts with implementing a vision, carrying out the vision, and differentiating yourself from your competitors, right? If you're going to say you're a people first company, well, you're going to have to back that up with what are your employees saying, right? And then, because if the employees are having a great employee experience because they are in an amazing company culture, your customers are going to notice it. They are going to notice. It's going to be a palpable. It's going to feel different, and then that's what's going to attract then those shareholders. That's going to attract media attention. That's going to attract even more employees as you grow and go through your inflection points, et cetera. People want to be part of it, right? Want to be part of that culture. And so now the hardest challenge now is being able to protect the culture, because once you get there, sort of like it's like in sports analogy, right? You become the #1 team in the country. Now everybody wants to take you down. So how do you maintain your ranking, right? So you got to protect the culture. You got to protect the values instilled in your culture, right? to make sure that that it's sustainable and that wasn't just a fly by night scenario, right? A lot of these companies, yeah, they have long-term plans 10 years ahead to make sure that their company culture withstands changes and fluctuations in the market, right? I mean, Southwest, I can't speak for COVID, but even during the financial crisis of 2008, they did not lay off one person, because they believed that they could do it without ruining the lives of people, right, and creating suffering in their employees. And so they were able to do that just by getting creative, by putting people in different functions that were less busy at that time, right? And so so it's culture is it's not going to happen to flip of the switch. It'll take a few seasons and time, and it always starts with the people at the top championing the calling for that kind of company culture.
Marcel, what's interesting is my wife, Linda, who you've met, was a flight attendant for Southwest years ago when it first started. And it was a very catchy culture. It's like I got on the plane one time, we were flying on a pass, and I don't know, it was in July, but they had Christmas napkins. I said, "Why Christmas napkins?" She said, "Because Herb Keller just made a heck of a deal on Christmas napkins because they were, overstocked." And so we all want this airline to succeed. We want it to be a great experience. We want it to be profitable. And so they embraced it. Something that your employees in some companies would go, "This is ridiculous." In Southwest, it was like they were all in.
Right.
On that. So anyway, you're exactly right. What got you into servant leadership? I mean, you had this background, you experienced, your servant leader in the hospital, but you also were with Inc. magazine. You saw corporations all over the place. What kind of led you in to the umbrella of servant leadership?
Yeah. So I'll reference back go back to that hospital where I went from toxic management to that one person that led through servant leadership. And that was my first exposure. So I got a little curious. And then as I delved into the research, and to understand a little more about, connecting the dots to how this individual, his name was Bruce, how Bruce led our team to servant leadership. I kept bumping into terms like humility and self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and service to others, even like empathy and compassion, things like that, right? All those fuzzy terms that that even to this day, the hardlining companies that rule with the iron fist, they look down on terms like that because they don't think that it is that it's directly transferable to results and profit. And so all of the terms I mentioned are still very much sort of stigmatized as that's not going to work for us. Okay. And you know what, Sam? They're right. If you have a top-down command and control structure, servant leadership is never going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have to have the right belief system and mindset, and then be able to champion the cause, like I mentioned earlier. Okay. So that brings you to the question, at what point did that shift towards, I'm going to just dive headfirst into this and make this a practice in my coaching and all that? I was invited to speak for a company called the Casualty Actuarial Society, CAS. They're over 100 years old. And they called me up and said, "Want you to come out and do a speaking for us?" And I said, "Great. What topic?" And they said, We're thinking about servant leadership. So I said, sign me up. So I put together a servant leadership talk. It was my first speaking engagement. I wasn't even the keynote. I mean, there were, thousands of people there flying in from all over the world. It was their 100th anniversary event. And these are like some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. There are, actuaries and scientists, PhD level people that know all about math and data, that work for insurance companies. And, but they lacked the people skills. A lot of them that were rising to higher upper echelons of their businesses were realizing that they were running into the people issues all the time because they had the left brain skills of actuaries, but as they moved up the ranks, they realized that they really lacked the right brain skills of people and culture. Anyway, so I did my talk and it was awesome. And then when I got back, my phone rings and it's the guy that brought me out there, and he says, "We want to hire you and put you on a contract to deliver a series of workshops throughout the year on servant leadership." And I was off to the races from there. And that was 2014. So roughly 10, 11 years ago. And so from there, I was like, who else is doing this? So yeah, there are big companies, Kim Blanchard Companies does servant leadership, leadership development curriculums and all that. There are a few others. There's a couple of universities that have servant leadership curriculum. But not enough to that you're always, competing against the bigger fish and not making a name for yourself. I decided to jump on that bandwagon and really use the term to brand myself as sort of like the servant leadership guy, right? And so that worked for a while, and then Inc. magazine picked me up as one of their key columnists, and I've been writing a column for them for about 9 years now called the Servant Leadership Hub. And so you can find me there. There's all kinds of articles on that, on servant leadership. But in full disclosure, I think that because it's such a branded term, I didn't want to now pigeonhole myself into just one area, because leadership is such a wide array of styles and methodologies and practices and habits and skills, right? So I still, in my coaching programs, in my keynotes, I still adapt many of these servant leadership beliefs, mindsets, habits, and practices. But I don't think that I'm calling myself anymore of the servant leadership guy or guru, or because again, servant leadership has sort of like extended its tentacles into so many other areas, in so many other leadership philosophies, if you will, that I would be doing a disservice now, just telling the world I'm just servant leadership. Sorry, I can't come out to your keynote. I just do servant leadership. No, I mean, it's like, one of the tenets of servant leadership is culture building itself. It's build community, right? So the servant leadership evidence says that if you want a profitable company culture, you have to build community. You have to make sure that people come together and there's good relationships going on. People feel like there's connection and belonging, right? That's straight out of the servant leadership research that goes back 50, 60, 70 years, right? And now people are just tuning into it like, oh, hey, we need to build community around here. Oh, duh, of course, right? That's nothing new. And so, yes, I ventured out a little bit the servant leadership cookie cutter, if you will.
Well, I think it's, having run corporations before, having struggled with culture, and I have brought consultants in, and they usually have like a cookie cutter plan. I have not met many that have ever had the experience, the background that you did of talking to so many different companies. And when I spent the Sunday morning with you, that was one of the things that I just latched onto, is that this isn't just your idea through studying, what's in books. This is your overview of what you've seen working in companies. And that's kind of how you put your program together. I'm helping you duplicate what I've seen to be successful rather than follow my ABC plan of action. And so when you come across the CEO from a company and they say, I want to change the culture. I personally want the company to have a culture of giving, say, for instance. What is the first step that you do with a CEO of a company? How do you get them started down this pathway?
The first question I ask them is, Mr. CEO, what are your values? Sam, if they cannot recite one value that happens to be on all their fancy plaques on the wall as you walk down their conference halls and stuff, if they can't tell me what one value is, that tells me right there that this company is in trouble. So I start with revising, or if they're not living out their values on a day-to-day, if their values are not embedded into their people operations, in how they make decisions, and how they hire, even how they fire people, right? Then that's the starting point for me to build your company culture. Okay, let's go back to, okay, what are your values? If you inherited your founder's values and you're a 120-year-old company, and those values are just words on a piece of paper on the wall, man, okay, that's a great starting point. Because now we have, if you have a new executive team or new ownership, then let's start with, okay, let's find out what the values of the founders, the current founders are. Or if you're new founders and you haven't gone through a values identification process, that's your number one priority. Because you want the culture to have you want a culture of shared values, because now you have a baseline for hiring the right people. You have a strategy for retention and for promoting people into the right places as they exhibit those values. Right, it becomes part of their performance management system. They have to exhibit. So you want to make sure that those are living, breathing values. And so that's, in answer to your question, that's where I go first before I even talk about leadership and all of the mindset and practices.
Marcel, that's interesting because, what you're taught to do and buy into is mission and vision. What's your vision? What's your mission statement? Values is very seldom brought up in terms of what a corporation needs to develop so that the outside world knows who they are. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying there's not a lot of emphasis put on that. So when you're talking to CEOs, do many of them really understand the importance of values, do you think, historically in their organization?
I think that those that come to me have sort of already they've bought into the idea that values is important, that you operate through these values. So it's not too big of a hill to climb when you already see the importance of it. It's the CEO that just wants to come in. Hey, Marcel, we want a leadership program. We want to get our leaders, our managers, up to speed on that. Okay, great. Okay. So what they really want, they just want to, they're checking the box for some kind of training, the annual training, just so they stay compliant, right? And so those people are the ones that don't see the value of values being embedded into the organization. They just want to, get their managers some good training that is not sustainable. It's just, and I've done those, and I know as soon as I sign on, I'm like, yeah, this is just going to be good information for them. One year, out the other. The behaviors are not going to be sustainable because they're just going through the motions. So those are the ones that I question and caution. So I almost say screen out CEOs that are having those kind of conversations with me to say, this is not how we operate. This is not how we do business as a leadership development company. Okay, so if you really want to see change and growth and transformation, here's your starting point. And then we will be happy to walk you through a leadership development process. But once you have this belief system in place about the values and culture, right? Because those two are very, very aligned, right? Values and culture. Because now we can talk about, raising their capacity to lead other human beings, et cetera. But if they're not aligned on the values, and one manager operates through integrity and another manager basically says it's my way or the highway, well, there's misalignment there. So yeah, let's back up. Let's go back. Okay, step one, let's talk about your values, right? And sometimes the values don't even align with their mission or their vision or who they say they are or how they're going to get there, right? The strategy, there's no values in the strategy. And so you got opposing agendas, you got members of the C-suite pulling in different directions, right? Because they all got their own agendas. So, yeah.
And when you go into a company and a leader said, look, we got to make a change. We've got to create culture. Do you find that the participants in the program within that company embrace that change, or is there resistance to it?
Sometimes at the C-suite level, I've seen this. The CEO will be 100% all in. But what happens is that he may have had a shift in belief system where he realizes we want to lead this way. We want to make culture one of our highest priorities. Well, it just so happened that that person may have inherited a VP that isn't all in, that doesn't want to go that route, right? And so,
Yeah.
Right. And so that, this is what I've seen. They go along with it. The VP goes along with the new strategy, new direction. Culture is important. We're going to do servant leadership, et cetera. And they fake it till they make it. And then 6 months down the line, I get a call. Marcel, we just lost one of our VPs. Oh, okay. Who was it? Oh, it was so-and-so. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I saw that coming. I saw that coming from day one. Because if they're just kind of going through the motions and not really showing the enthusiasm or they're pushing back against the new strategy, of course you're going to run into problems down the line, right? So yeah, I've seen it that way. The best case scenario is always one where you inherit an executive team where everybody's all in. They're fully on board because they believe that this stuff works. Those are great to work with.
Yeah, and in your experience, because I'm speaking now to other corporate leaders that goes, boy, I don't know how my organization would take this. Overall, what's your experience? Is there more of an embrace? I mean, do people want culture in general? I mean, I know you've got your obstinance out there, but
yeah,
in general, don't people embrace culture?
In general, the best case scenario in general is the CEO embraces it, but not all managers want to operate that way.
Yeah.
That's where I run into problems. And so what happens now? Well, what do? Do you keep those managers on and really, brainwash them into believing like the owners or like the executives? Well, sometimes the managers take care of the problems themselves. They filter themselves out of the organization. What that means is they realize I'm no longer a fit here. So they move on.
Wow. And so, so someone says, I want to change my culture. You take them through the value proposition experience. What's step two? Then do you create a plan that you then meet with the other senior management with? Kind of go to step two in that process.
We want to make sure that we want to gather enough evidence that that the values are being instilled in your day-to-day operations, in your decision-making process, right? And that there's no shenanigans, if you will, going on, meaning that you're not saying that you're going to operate through values and then hire a bad apple that doesn't align with the values, right? And now all of a sudden you've got a new employee that is spreading their toxicity around. So yeah, we want to make sure that there's a season once we start to embed the values into the organization, into their communication channels, and exhibited through examples of how they're doing it. So you want to bring good storytelling into your huddles, your team meetings, and maybe even your all hands, right? So you will always want to reinforce those values so that people they're getting acclimated to it. So that whole process is really step two. Is we want to make sure that is now what we said we're going to do. We're actually doing it, and we are seeing how it's affecting the organization in a positive way. And in our hiring, and then I've seen values create the challenge of this individual no longer aligns with the values, and so what do we do with that person? Okay, let's put them on a performance improvement plan for 90 days. Well, 90 days goes by, they're still not getting it, and so now it's another conversation you have to have. Do we get rid of this person, or invest more coaching and training into them? So yeah, it creates some tension, if you will, some good tension, because you're trying to elevate your culture, and determine, all right, well, okay, who do we got in here, and are we, do we invest into the people that are not cutting it, and they were mishires in the first place, and now they work. Right. So what do we do with this? Okay. And so that's all part of step two. And then when we move beyond that, and that could be a good 6 months to a year until an organization has sort of fully immersed into their value system, and it's permeated their org structure. Then step three is we can talk about, all right, now we can take the leaders, and we can do this in conjunction with the values. Is let's bring our leaders and give them some new skills that align with those values. And that's where the servant leadership curriculums come in, coaching comes in, to just bolster the manager's ability and capacity to lead well. Because if integrity is one of your values, well, guess what? You're going to have to lead by integrity. So then that speaks to the leadership piece, right? So it's constantly in alignment there.
It's interesting, hiring the right people with that culture in mind. I know when I was starting to build and we were growing exponentially, and I had to hire an HR person just because we were growing so fast. We needed an HR department. And so I got a very, very qualified person, highly recommended, brought them in. In the first year, Christmas comes, and I say, I want to write a Christmas bonus to everybody because we've had such a good year. And the head of HR said, oh, no, you can't call it Christmas. it will be offensive to certain people. And so this is political correctness, which evidently was part of her training, wherever she came from.
Yeah.
And he was just like, wait a minute. Okay, so I said, I don't know that I totally believe what you're saying, that people will be offended, by my generosity at Christmas time. But let's test it. So let's write a check to everybody and put Christmas bonus on the check. And if someone is so offended they turn the check back in and won't cash it, then I'm all in for your political correctness. And we did that, and of course, nobody turned the check back in. So, do you find that getting HR to buy in and understanding how to hire people that embrace a culture of servant leadership is important?
Say that one more time. Let me see if I got that.
Do you think that training, I'm trying to think of, okay, so you're trying to bring in a culture, you're growing, you got to hire the right people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no sense in hiring the wrong people like I did. And not a bad person, just wasn't on the same page with, the culture that I wanted to create. Is that something that you have to specifically work with if they have an HR department on setting those standards for how are you hiring people? What is the criteria?
Right. I think most HR departments that are well-versed and they have capable, skillful people understand the legal side of it. So the HR person that was trying to consult you to say, no, don't put Christmas on it, she's trying to protect the organization from any kind of lawsuit. And in this stage of wokeness and politically correctness and all that, it is, especially, you have to be sensitive to what's going on, because you have people that have good intentions, that we want diversity and all that. And then you have those that have an agenda to push on you. Right. And so I tread with caution, because a lot of companies have been sort of like sabotaged by wokeness to make sure that they are having their DEI mandates thrust on people, and HR, a lot of HR departments, they've been handcuffed. It's mandated from the top, and it's the age and culture that we're in. But I see a shift going away from that now as well. So we're recording this in December of 2024. I think 2025, and I've already seen a shift of a lot of companies leaving DEI strategies behind, because they have seen how it has caused more harm than good with mandating these DEI programs. Anyway. So for me is to sit down with an HR person. If I ever do, usually I sit down with the CEO or the executive team. But if I sit down with the HR person, I just want to make sure they have an understanding that is not politically motivated of what diversity is. Because diversity goes so far beyond just racial or ethnicity or even sexual orientation or identity. It goes so far beyond that. But because of the political world that we live in now, it has become sort of, that has been put into a very small box, and we have to shatter that box to understand the full spectrum of what diversity is, to include people that are victims right now of ageism. If you're even 40 and over, and those of you that are listening to me, right, you know what I'm talking about, right? If you are 40 and over, or 50, you can't even find a job. You can even get your resume in through those AI-driven screening, resume screening services, because they're screening out people that via keywords or experience level. So talk about diversity. Bring in people of every generation from 20s, from Gen Zers all the way up to boomers, because that's what's going to create a much more impactful organization when you have different views, diverse views and viewpoints, I should say, and bringing in differences of how you see the world around you and how to make decisions around problems that not just one segment of the population has a say in, but open it up to other sectors and bring everyone's perspectives in and color that with ideas and input from various internal stakeholders, employees, et cetera, right? In your organization, whatever your background is, whatever your affiliation is, gender, whatever it is, right? So yeah, that to me, that is true diversity. And it's a conversation we need to have, move it beyond this DEI box that we have been placed in since 2020.
That's timely. I've got two questions for you as we're coming down the home stretch here. Number one, what do you think the biggest myth about servant leadership is?
That it's weak and that you're a doormat if you operate that way, and that you're going to lose your power, and it's a subservient way of leading. So those are all misconceptions about servant leadership, because people spend too much time focusing on the servant part of servant leadership, and they forget about the leader part of servant leadership, which is about holding people accountable, which is about creating excellence around you and achieving results, just like every leader wants to achieve results. So servant leadership is not just, let's gather around and have a country club atmosphere and make sure everyone's having fun, right?
Right.
We still need results, and we still have to hold ourselves to the expectations of our various stakeholders, right? So
what do you think the biggest truth is then about servant leadership?
The biggest truth about servant leadership, well, the biggest truth really is that it's probably the hardest leadership philosophy to pull off. And I'd say the second biggest truth about it is that when you know how to pull it off, you're probably going to see the best results, the best results you've ever seen in your organization once you're able to adapt to that style and train other managers to operate that way. You're going to see a noticeable difference in how people respond. People inside your organization, meaning your employees, but you're also going to see a noticeable difference in those people you serve, your customers. And even if you don't have customer-facing people, who do you serve? Who are your internal, quote, customers? You're going to see a noticeable difference in how they respond to that style of leadership. So it's a win-win on all sides.
Well, Marcel, the Sunday morning that we spent a couple of hours going through this discussion and looking at how you evaluate an organization as to, are they on track, are they not on track? And then your implementation of service to that organization was very engaging. I mean, I was just blown away because, again, I've had all kinds of consulting organizations that have come in and introduced, a weekend training, a 90-day training. None of it was sustainable. But, thinking back, none of it actually went to values. It was all mechanics. Mm-hmm. And is this person talking to this person? Are we having the right kind of meetings? Are we meeting, frequently enough? Blah, 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 blah. So they were trying to tear down silos without values. And I see that as a huge missing piece of the puzzle that you capitalize on. So I want to encourage CEOs out there that may be watching this. You need to call this guy. He's on to something significant. I want to thank you for today, Marcel. I want to thank you for what you're doing. It's really needed in industry out there. People need to, because I think a lot of people have that passion and desire and calling to do something that goes beyond what benefits themselves. They're just not quite sure how to get there. So blessings to you for everything that you're doing, and congratulations on your success.
Appreciate it, Sam, and I'm glad that we did this this reverse interviewing, and I'm honored. And folks, that Sam, that actually it was his idea, and it's the first time actually the second time that has happened to me. But I'm honored that you decided to take the time to actually interview me. I have, over the years have been so ingrained and almost programmed to interview people and serve my community by placing leaders and executives that have the same belief system that I do in front of my audience to make sure that they are getting the proper attention. But I've never had the tables flipped on me. So this has been a humbling experience, but one that I have welcomed, and I hope it has blessed you folks that are listening as well, to listen to me for a change as well, and some of the things that are going on in my world. So thank you, Sam, for creating this space for this conversation.
Well, let's talk again soon.
You bet.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.